Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Marla Gordon, Director of Clinical Services here at Kendal at Home. And thank you for joining part 4 of our 5-part falls prevention series. If you've missed our previous events this past week, don't worry, they've been recorded and will be available shortly to you on our member portal. Today, we're pleased to have Mike Gelfgot with us today from Activate Brain and Body. He's in Cincinnati, and Mike is going to take us through a 4-pronged approach at fall prevention and also fill us in a little bit more about Activate Brain and Body, the organization that he is affiliated with. And Mike, we're happy to have you with us and would love to hear a little more about you and your background before you get started.
Sure. Yeah, actually, it's part of the presentation, Marla. Nope. I will absolutely make sure everybody. No, that's good. But I'll give you I'll give everyone a bit of a, I guess, of a sneak peek, sort of say. So my background is exercise science. My business partners and I, we had a bunch of health clubs, 20 plus different health clubs prior to opening up Activate Brain and Body. Like I said, I'll talk a bit more about myself. But today's topic is 4 steps to avoid falling. Let's get right into it. We will have time for Q&A at the end as well. So, question is, how or what is it that makes us fall to begin with? Most of you may already be aware, but I'm going to list out a few things that might cause us to lose our balance and stability. So, according to the National Institute of Aging, what they say is the reason why most of us lose balance is simply because we have poor eyesight, maybe we don't hear very well, or we have, in general, poor reflexes. They continue to report that as we get older, of course, we lose muscle mass. We, in general, have poor balance, which affects our ability to stay balanced, stay coordinated, which is why we fall. Big reason why a lot of people tend to fall is because they just don't move well. They have poor gait, they have poor flexibility, poor mobility. Another big reason why we tend to fall is when we change positions, right? When we go from laying to seated to standing, when we change positions, our blood pressure tends to drop, which makes us dizzy and we tend to lose balance. Now, most of us are aware of some of these things. And I guess a better question is, which is why I'm here, what can be done? What can I do to minimize my ability to fall? Once again, my name is Mike. I'm with Activate Brain and Body. Here's what we do. What we do is we take exercise science that relates to brain health, and we combine it with some really fun and interactive technology that also focuses on the brain to help people build stronger, more resilient, healthier brains. Of course, part of brain health is balance and stability. It's one aspect of the exercise program that we put our clients through. And so today I'm going to talk about what are some things that we can all do to minimize our ability to fall. So whenever you're trying to improve in anything, step 1, you got to have just a basic baseline, a basic way to assess basically where am I now, and then wherever you are now, of course, you're going to want to do something, which is why you're measuring it to begin with. And then, in the next, say, 4, 6, 8 weeks, reassess to see how you're doing. This is what we do in our facilities. This is the 4-square step test that we put our clients through to determine what is the likelihood of them falling. And it's a pretty straightforward, a very, very simple screen that can be done at home. It might require some assistance, but it's pretty straightforward. Basically, all you do is you lay down in a crisscross pattern like this, either a cane or a rod, or what we do at our facility is we tape a 40-inch vertical line and a horizontal line, 40 inches. And then the screen starts like this. People start at square 1, both feet go to square 2, both feet go to square 3, 4, back to 1, and then you reverse the order. You just do it one time, clockwise, one time, counterclockwise, and of course, you're timing to see how quickly can one do it. What is important is when you go from one square to the next is both of your feet go into each of the squares. In order for it to count, of course, you have to step over an object. Be careful, especially if you put the rod down, as that may cause some injuries if you step on it. Now, here's how the scoring system works. If you are, it's depending on who is it that you're screening. And once again, there are so many different ways to assess fall risk. This is just what we do at the facility. We love at this particular screen because it's basic and it happens to be one of the more well-researched screens to assess the likelihood of falling. And the scoring system is pretty self-explanatory. So step one, once you assess where you are, step two, you need to try to do something to improve it. And so one of the most effective things that you can do to improve your ability to stabilize and balance is, of course, exercise. But when I talk about exercise, I want to make sure I talk about exercise from this perspective. When you exercise, make sure to exercise in all three planes of motion. Most of us exercise just in this plane, like we do, this sort of stuff. We squat up and down, we push things up, we pick things up from the floor. That's only one plane of motion. See, when our lives happen in all three planes of motion. In our lives, we not only carry things, we pull, push, kneel, squat, we rotate, we reach up, we reach down. Our lives are lived in all three planes of motion. However, most of us tend to primarily either move or in general exercise in one plane. As you can imagine, you basically atrophy, if you will, other parts of the brain that require you to rotate or move side to side. And therefore, when it's unfamiliar because you haven't done it, you're more likely to lose your balance. Now, it is a given, but I will go ahead and say it anyway. Before you start any physical activity, or I should say any physical program, definitely make sure you have some sort of clearance if you need to, or consult your physician. Right now, I want to give you some simple exercises that you can do at home in all three planes of motion. There are thousands of exercises, literally thousands, from beginning or beginner, intermediate, and of course, advanced level exercises. These are the most basic ones. So why is it important to move in this transverse plane? Anytime you move in any sort of rotation, it strengthens your core musculature. All movements basically begin and end with a proper core musculature, meaning strengthening of the core. That is, your core musculature needs to be strong in order for you to have good movement. All movement begins and ends, if you will, in the center of the body. So this is one way you can exercise those muscles. So in a seated position, it's really straightforward, right? You can just rotate side to side. And once you get really good with that, right, then if you want to progress things still in the seated position, you can reach up, middle, down. You can reach up one way, look the other way. The idea is to make sure your shoulders basically rotate. Now, the only time you need to really pay attention to any of this rotational business is if you have any sort of back challenges, back issues. So once again, definitely get clearance from a physical therapist or a physician to start exercising. Now, if you're good here, and by the way, I also want to acknowledge that we rotate every day. Every time you put on, maybe a seatbelt, or you reach for a glass of water, you're rotating your shoulders. So next time you sit, you're sitting in a chair, whatever you're doing, just pay attention to how many times you rotate your shoulders, even if it's subtle. Now, once you get pretty good at the basic stuff, then you can do essentially the same thing seated, but standing, which requires a lot more balance and a lot more stability. 2, what's the second plane of motion? It's the frontal plane, or basically any side-to-side movement. The most basic way to begin is have something you can hold on to and just do basic side kick exercises to strengthen the lower part of the body, particularly the butt muscles. your butt muscles are really critical for squatting and lunging and kneeling and walking, as they are the primary muscles that get engaged. Most of us have really weak butt muscles because we tend to sit on our butts, or in general, we're inactive. And remember, your brain and your body adapts to whatever is it that you are doing on a day-to-day basis. This is a wonderful exercise to activate and strengthen those butt muscles, which will minimize one's fall of risk or risk of falling. Now, once you get pretty good at that and you feel pretty stable, you feel coordinated, good. Now you can do the exact same thing, just literally walk from side to side, not necessarily forwards or backwards. That's the next plane of motion. I'm talking about side to side movement. And once again, if you want to progress things a bit further, as you're walking from side to side, you can also throw in something with rotation. Now, once you get good at these basic exercises, now you are changing elevation and rotating, which makes things a bit more complex, which also will help you strengthen and improve your overall proprioception, which is basically how your brain and your body reacts to the environment that you're in. There will be questions at the end. If you have questions, please, or there will be time for questions at the end. If you have questions, please write them down. And the last plane of motion, and most of us are really good in this plane of motion, is anything basically forwards or backwards, up, down type of deal. Now, I'm showing a lot of lower body exercises that you can do. Once again, there are thousands for both upper and lower, but I'm showing a lot of lower body exercises because as it relates to balance, it's the lower body that's involved the most, which is why I'm showing you more lower body exercises. Once again, this is a very basic exercise, just basic chair squatting exercises will help strengthen the front of the leg, quadricep muscles, and of course, butt muscles. I will say one thing about squatting. Most of us, when we sit down to get back up, it seems what we do is a lot of like we throw our upper body forward as like momentum, right? To get up out of a chair. If you notice yourself using your upper body muscles to get up, try not to use your upper body to get up, meaning try to keep your upper body a bit more upright and really think about relying more on the lower part of the body, particularly the butt and the quadricep muscles, to help you get out of a chair. Now, once you get pretty good at doing the squatting, meaning your muscles get a little stronger, then I would encourage you, when you do any exercises in general, at home or at a gym or a facility, do as many exercises as you can on one leg, as opposed to two legs. And here's why. When we are walking, we don't walk two legs at a time, right? We walk one leg at a time. Because of that, you spend most of your day on one leg. You got to be really good doing things on one leg if you want to minimize your ability to fall. I hope that makes a lot of sense because it's pretty straightforward. It's a very logical way of looking at it. Okay. Now, number 3, do things to improve your gait / movement. So to improve your gait, meaning how well you take a step forward, the most basic thing you can do is actually just be diligent in picking up your feet when you walk. Like some of the clues, or not clues, some of the cues that we give to our clients that shuffle, don't walk properly, is pick up your knees. In other words, make sure your knees are up to your waistline, at least when you walk. So it looks a little funny initially, but that's okay because you're training your central nervous system to pick up feet. And ultimately, it'll be more natural and more involuntary versus voluntary. Now, once you get pretty good at stepping, you feel pretty good. You have a good gait. You have a good stride. This is a really simple cone drill you can do. Of course, you're not sprinting. By the way, if you want to work on quickness and because you feel like you may be a little slow, before you do anything quick, you need to do everything slow and controlled. Now, this is a very simple cone drill that will improve one's gait. What you do is this: you don't sprint, you just do a quicker or a faster walk. Remember, but that's a progression. So if you are not moving well now, then all you do is take those big steps, meaning knees up to waist. That would be sufficient. So you would walk straight with basically high knees. Then you would do a side walk. Once again, pick up your feet, but now you're working in a different plane. Then you will backpedal or just walk backwards. And then 3 or 4, you would shuffle or walk sideways again, just in a different direction. This is a wonderful way to improve, once again, your proprioception, which is your brain and your body operating well in the environment that you're in. Neuromuscular efficiency, which is the way that your brain and your body basically communicates in general. And of course, work on your gait. Now, to improve movement, we got to do what we can to decrease tension. The reason why movement in general decreases just because we're so tight, we're so stiff. Now, your core musculature is important because at the end of the day, that's where movements, if you will, originates. If you see some people that when they walk, they don't actually walk, they kind of waddle, right? And those people that waddle, and they don't walk straight, those people are a lot more prone to falling, right? Now, as equally as important core strength, what we also need is good mobility at the ankle joint. And this is a very simple yet effective exercise you can do to increase the flexibility, the mobility of your joint. All you're doing is just sitting down and you're taking your ankle joint and you're just moving it around in all sorts of different directions. So for our clients that have a hard time with balance, we'll have them do 40, 50, 60 repetitions on per ankle. And then once you do that, that'll warm up your ankle joint. And like, think about this, right? When you walk and you step on something, let's say that's uneven, a lot of us tend to lose balance because we don't have the flex, the give, right, in that ankle joint. This will help to improve the fluidity of the joint. Anytime you move a joint, your joints release a fluid called synovial fluid, which is like just like a lubricant, if you will, for your joints. So once we do that, then the next thing you got to do is just continue to work on increasing the flexibility of the calf muscle. And this is one of the most basic stretches you can do. Once again, there are tons and tons of stretches, but if you strengthen your core musculature, you work on the mobility of your ankle joint and the flexibility of your calf muscles, the likelihood of you falling will dramatically decrease. And probably one of the most important things to consider, and most of us don't consider this, is learn how to slow yourself down, decelerate. I think it's like 70 or 80% of knee injuries happen on the way down, not on the way up, because we are not controlling ourselves with the opposite leg. We just stomp and boom, there goes the joint, whether it's ankle, knee, or hip. So how do you practice slowing down? How do you practice decelerating? Well, you practice decelerating by understanding when you're actually decelerating. So in a squatting position, you're decelerating on the way down. So my suggestion would be practice that on a count of 4. So you'll get up from a chair and then you'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, and then gently sit down. Don't flop. Try not to ever flop when you're sitting down or you're stepping. Control your own body. Once you get pretty good at that, then what we really got to practice is controlling or decelerating one leg at a time, whether you do it on a side step like I'm showing here, right, or coming down forward, right? So come up on a small ledge and then slow yourself down using the opposite leg on the way down, and practice that a few times. Right. So, and then of course, as you're doing this, the objective is, okay, how is this working out for me? Go back and reassess using the 4 square balance test that I talked about. Okay. Now there's this whole brain component that's also involved with balance. However, I want to make sure that I don't give too much information. It's almost like less is more. So what I'd like to do is open it up for some Q&A.
If you have any questions for Mike, you can click on Q&A or chat at the bottom of the screen and feel free to type those in. Mike, what would you recommend for someone who isn't sure how to start these exercises on their own? Do you recommend they get a therapy order and begin with a therapist in their area, or how do they get started in doing this on their own time?
Yeah. And so part of the reason why, and let me actually backtrack for a second. Part of the reason why I wanted to show some of these basic exercises, right? Because as long as you're released by a physical therapist and a medical professional, honestly, you're fine to do all this basic stuff on your own. The question is, will I actually do it? Am I motivated to do it? That's the other part, right? So if that's the case, then yes, my suggestion would be then, find somebody you like, find somebody you trust. When you're looking for a personal trainer to work with, remember, you're interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing you. And so what I think is really important to understand, first and foremost, is, do you like them? Do you feel good being with them? And then, of course, check to see what their credentials are and what is their plan to help. Marla, does that answer your question?
Sure, it does. And you stressed this multiple times, but that importance of, if you're working with a trainer, working with a therapist, and you find that you're only working in those single planes, not every therapist, not every trainer is created equal. Not everybody you would think would have the same knowledge base and put it to work, but that's, as a therapist, I know it's not the case. So certainly advocating for yourself and speaking up and talking about moving in different directions. Oftentimes we'd see patients where the physical therapist will work on walking straight, but they don't work on turning, and somebody turns quickly, and that's when we see a fall happening. So working in all of those planes is so important with whomever you choose to work with.
And I brought up we have two questions, and I promise I will address these questions here in a second. Before we move quickly, right? And that's exactly what happens with something comes at us, and we need to react to whatever's in our environment, and we react quickly, and therefore we lose balance and we fall, right? You have to train in an environment where quickness is promoted, but you progress to that, right? You start out, right, in a very proper environment where you can adapt properly. And adaptation, you guys remember, only happens when you're able to do something. So that's really important to understand, is like, when you're working with somebody, are you able to do what they're asking you to do? Do you feel like it's getting easier? Because if what you're doing isn't getting easier because it's too challenging right away, adaptation won't set in and you won't actually improve, right? All right, so the question is, what do you think is the most important fall prevention exercise? What do I think is the most important? If I were to pull two big levers that will create the greatest impact on one's ability to minimize falls, I would say it's one, making sure that the individual has good mobility at the ankle joint, right? And then two, make sure the individual exercises, of course, in all three planes of motion, right? Once again, most of us, like, the basic workout is basically this, and I'm a big fan of any movement. I love it. It's really good. But if you have a specific outcome that you're after, you've got to input specific information, right, to get a specific output. I hope that answers the question. Are legs the most important part of the body to strengthen for balance? Legs and overall core musculature, but not just strengthening. I would also work on, of course, balance training. I would also work on flexibility and mobility. Like, when we talk about exercise in general, unfortunately, Fortunately, I don't want to say unfortunately, but I think just the most common thing that most people tend to do when it comes to exercise is cardiovascular activity, which is good, right? And then we do basically do some strengthening, strength training exercises, meaning 3 or 4 sets or 2 sets of 10 to 12 repetitions. And those exercises will build strength, especially if you're giving yourself enough resistance. But when it comes to balance, you need balance exercises along with strength exercises, along with flexibility and mobility exercises to minimize the odds of falling. Does that, whoever asked that question, does that make sense? Cool, great. This is good. What else you guys got?
Any other questions for Mike? Don't be shy. Just click on the chat or Q&A and type them in.
And maybe while you guys are thinking, this is something, I'll give you food for thought. The reason why our balance, reaction time, processing speed, agility, strength, power declines as we get older has nothing to do with age, like your actual chronological age, right? It has everything to do with the environment that we are or are not in. Maybe we should be in a different environment, because remember, your brain and your body, and I mentioned this earlier, it constantly adapts to whatever kind of inputs that we are receiving. So if the input my brain and my body receives is I'm sitting, it's going to deactivate any muscle that I'm not using for sitting, if that makes sense, and activate more muscles that are required for me to sit, which are going to be my hip flexor muscles, which are going to be my lower back muscles, which is going to jack up my entire posture, and it's going to create all sorts of tension in my lower back and my neck and cause probably tension headaches. It's adaptation. It's a curse and it's a blessing. But once you recognize it, if you change the environment, you change how you are, how you adapt, basically. So if the environment that you're in practices things like balance, stability, flexibility, strength, endurance, and power type of training, guess what? You will be 80, 90 years old and be able to stand on one leg and balance. Norma, great tip. Do you need a referral? Norma, I would always love a referral. Sure. Yes, that'd be wonderful.
I think she means, do you to participate? She lives in Cincinnati. Does she need a referral letter from her doctor to be able to?
Gotcha. Gotcha. Different referral. Thank you. Thank you, Marla, for clarifying. No, you don't need a, we're not a clinical facility. We're in fact, we're a non-clinical facility. We don't need any referrals to work with people. I will say this: if you like the brain and you're interested in learning what you can do to build a healthier brain, and when I say healthier brain, I'm talking about things like focus, attention, reaction time, processing speed, balance, of course, executive function, and short-term memory. Those are the health benefits that I refer to when I say healthy brain. Then you'll love what we do. We use exercise as a way to stimulate the brain. We use thought as a way to stimulate the brain and cause these neuroplastic changes in the brain. Cool.
There's one more question in there.
Oh, okay. Can I do something to improve my balance while I'm standing and engaging those balance exercises? It's hard for me to get started, as I already know I lose my balance easily. You want to start in a way where you're not losing your balance, right? And by the way, there are, so meaning it could be, let me just tell you what I'm talking about. Start in a way where you have lots of points of contact on whether it's the, well, first of all, the floor, and of course your hands as well. So in other words, so imagine I am, say, standing or on the floor, right? I'm holding on to a chair. However, I am telling my brain to put all my weight, say, on my left leg. So my right leg, say, is off the floor, right? I have 3 points of contact though, so I feel pretty stable, although a little unstable because I have one leg off the floor. right? And it's as simple as that, right? See how long you can hold it, switch legs, take off one arm, then take off the other arm, and over time work yourself up to having better balance. It's just one example. Gosh, there's so many different things you could do. Let me give you
Mike, can I interrupt for 1 second? Someone's just
Yeah.
asking if you could stop sharing the video. They like to see you while you're talking.
Oh, they can't see me? No kidding.
You can see
Oh
you
my
just
goodness.
tiny on the side. Yep.
Yeah, all right. Yes, 1 second. Let me hang on. Stop share. Here we go. Okay.
There we go.
Let's see. Oh, yeah, I was gonna say resource. Okay, here's a really wonderful resource. I love these guys. They are functionalaginginstitute.com. Check them out. They have so much cool education. It's so wonderful. My recommendation would be to buy their stuff, and get yourself educated. It's really interesting. It's really interesting, especially if you want to get started and you don't mind doing it yourself. That's a wonderful source. Moving images on the screen. Oh, gotcha. Okay, sorry, Julia. Yep, got it.
Is Cincinnati the only location for Activate Brain and Body at this time?
Yes, for now. Although we have big goals, everyone. We have big goals. But yes, for now, we are in Cincinnati, Ohio. Yeah.
Excellent. I don't see any other questions coming through, but we appreciate the wonderful information that you shared. And some of the folks on today are already participating, but if you're not, remember that we have Movement Mondays. Every Monday, we have exercises with Stephanie, one of our care coordinators, working on balance and strength. And we also have Flex with Terry, another care coordinator, working on seated exercise to music. And tomorrow's fall prevention event will be Stephanie and Melissa discussing Stepping On, an evidence-based fall prevention program that we received a grant through the Ohio Department of Health to be able to offer to our members. So lots of ways to keep you vertical. And thanks for joining us, Mike.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.